this room tonight and the leaders that they will have just like a new idea of who you are, and that just they won't be transformed by the ways of the world and the ways of what people tell them that they should be. And when they sing these songs, that it's just not lyrics that rhyme, that has a nice tune, but it's your love for them. And that they would not just see you as a fictional character that sometimes you talk about in church, but it's a living thing that's in our world that they get to have a relationship with, and that their pain isn't crushed, or their pain isn't... I just pray that they will recognize your love as greater than their pain, because Satan and you aren't equal. Satan is just something that tries to get to your throne, but you are so much more powerful, and I pray that they will be able to see that tonight and be able to trust in you fully. Amen. All right, so Zach wanted me to talk about obeying your parents because it's Father's Day. And before we start with this message, I just think it's important to kind of, a little disclaimer, because this sounds like such a boring topic. And when he texted me, he was like, I want you to talk about this. I was like, okay, that's really dumb. But, I don't even know. I think that it's just so boring because we hear it all the time. And whether you're Christian or not Christian or whatever you believe in, I guarantee somebody has looked at you and been like, you need to listen to your parents. They always know best. And when things are repeated over and over in our lives, they kind of lose their meaning and their spark. And I'm allowed to say this because I've definitely done that. Whether it be Christmas and they're talking about baby Jesus, it's I don't listen because it's just a common thing that I think I know about. And that's what my initial thought was when I first looked into this topic too. So I would just encourage you that just because it's obeying your parents, and that sounds super lame, how important it is. Because I personally have gotten a little bit better at this in my 8th grade year. I kind of realized that I probably should be working better to obey my parents. But it wasn't until I genuinely looked at the verses and I prayed about it that it revealed in such a new light to me. So I don't know. I just would encourage you not to check out just because it sounds boring, because that's what I thought too until I actually listened to it. Because if you do that, then you're eliminating God speaking to you, and that's a really dangerous spot to be in. So before, now with that being said, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about my personal relationship with my parents really quickly, because I'm really the only person that I can speak on, if that makes sense. So for me, I'm a very independent, kind of strong-willed person, and that's who God made me to be. But also, I have 2 older siblings who are closer in age, and then I'm kind of further behind. So my whole life, I've been trying to keep up and catch up with them, and that caused me to mature a little bit quicker. And I'm not bragging and saying I'm so mature. I'm just, when you're the youngest, that's kind of what happens. You just get introduced to things sooner, and a lot of the time, it might not be for you, but for me, I kind of got this independent trait because I got left behind everywhere. So I kind of had to learn how to do things by myself. And with this trait, it's a good thing in some ways, but it's also a bad thing because it caused me and my parents to kind of butt heads a lot, because I had my own opinion and I wanted to do things my way, and that's not the way they wanted me to. So that was kind of my story, but I don't know every single one of your guys' stories and your personal opinions and all that stuff. If you're more independent or you more depend on people, I don't know. But I think we can all agree that you get to a certain age, kind of where we're all at, where you're who are these people? I can do it on my own. And for me, that's kind of been my whole life. But then I got to 11, and I was my mind, so powerful. I am the all-knowing Sara. I know everything. And I, that's even just a few years ago. And I was that wasn't even right. And I think that once you get to that age where you get this sudden boost of independence, that's a good thing. God created you to have that independence. It's not a bad thing. It's just a place where it can be a little bit dangerous, because the whole world is telling you that it's normal. Teenagers are just angsty. They just are just going to be a little bit problematic. And the whole world is just telling you that it's normal to be disobedient to your parents because it's just the age you're in. And I think it's stupid that we're listening to the world, that also turning on your TV and seeing a new murder doesn't surprise you, or a new kidnapping or school shooting. That's normal. So why are we listening to the world about that disobeying your parents is normal? Because it shouldn't be. And just because you have this boost of independence, and you're gonna have different opinions as your parents, and this fact right here is something that I struggled so much with, and I still am struggling with, but it's really important, is that you're allowed to disagree with your parents. You're just not allowed to disrespect them. And that's where I had a hard time wrapping my mind around it, because I just have a lot of strong opinions that I act on a lot, which it's not a bad thing. Just because you're a mixture of your parents, you have a little bit of your dad, a little bit of your mom, and you might look like one of them, or you might have a character trait, but you're still your own individual person. You're allowed to have different opinions. You're allowed to have different things that you want to do with your future kids, but you're not allowed to put that into action until you are not under the authority of your parents anymore. Because for me, something that I've been trying to practice that I think would be really beneficial to all of us is when your parent says something that's so irrational and just you just think it's so dumb, is to think, what happens if you grow up and then you look at your kid and they are acting just how you did, and then you suddenly have your opinion just switched, and now that you're a parent, you realize that your parent was right? Because I want to treat my parents the way that I want my future kids to treat me. And I think we all should work on that a little bit more. Give them more grace, because just because they're an authority figure doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, because they're still human. And the thing is, with your parents' mistakes, you still get the blessing, which is kind of a cool deal, because of course, I'm not saying that if your parent tells you to go murder somebody or steal something that goes directly against God's will, then that's kind of a different story. But if your parent is made a mistake on a certain thing, but you still choose to obey them, you still get the blessing. You obey and you're blessed. And that's just something that just shows how important it is to God. I didn't even realize that obey your parents is the first commandment. It's so important to God, because as kids, even with this boost of independence, we still don't have everything figured out. You still don't have everything figured out when you are a parent. You need that leadership in your life to guide you. And it's so important to God, and that's why in his plan, he had a mom and a dad who had their kid and then led that kid to Christ, and that whole deal. That, of course, that doesn't really happen every time, because we live in a fallen world. But in God's original plan, that's how it was supposed to play out. And that's why we have parents, is because we don't know everything yet. And that's why we have they're our earthly leadership, and they're supposed to be following God's leadership. And the Bible story that I was pretty fascinated with was the story of Abraham in this way, because I'm gonna just say it really quickly. Abraham, if you don't know, Abraham really wanted a kid, and God said that he was gonna give it to him, but it took a really long time, and then they finally had their kid, and his name was Isaac, and it was Abraham's most prized possession. He loved him with all of his heart. And then God was like, okay, you're gonna go and sacrifice him to prove that you trust me. And Abraham did. And it's a symbol of showing that the most important thing to your heart, you still have to trust God with. Now, Isaac didn't end up dying, but they built the altar, and Isaac was with him, helping him build the altar. And every time that Bible story is shared, there we go. Every time that Bible story is told, I've only ever heard it as Abraham's perspective of trusting God, which is really important, because that shows a parental of trusting God. But what about Isaac? The amount of trust and obedience he had for his dad. Historians say he's 12, 14. He wasn't a baby. He knew what was going on. He knew that they were up there building a altar, and they didn't have a sheep or anything. He knew what was happening, but he still believed that his dad was hearing something from God that he needed to trust him with. And of course, if you're parent says to go kill you on a mountain, like, don't do it. But I'm saying, like, you need to use that as a reflection of how you're supposed to trust your parents. Because for me, my parents, the whole time, like, I thought I was going to get to go to Ridgeview for high school, and I was so excited. And then just out of the blue, they were like, hey, God is really leading us that we need to keep you at Central Christian. And this was just like recently, and I was like, like, that is not what I wanted to do. I don't think Isaac wanted to die either. But if you still choose joy and you still choose obedience in that situation, you're the one that gets blessed. You have to trust that whatever your parent is asking you to do, whether it be like moving or switching schools, whatever it may be, you have to trust that God is speaking to them, and you have to be obedient like Isaac was to Abraham. So I have some verses that I really liked, and there's 3 of them. And I'm just going to read them because I thought they were really cool, just showing the command that God gives us, because I think it's really dumb, and like I've done it too, so I'm not pointing fingers, but this whole wishy-washy Christian thing where we think that we can believe one part but not the other part, and it shows so clearly, especially it being the very first commandment, how important this is to God. And it's like in these verses, and I just really liked it because it just shows how important it is and how we need to follow it. If we say we're a Christian, we need to be willing to follow every single one of his commands, not just the ones we pick and choose. Okay, so Exodus 20:12 is, honor your father and mother, then you will have a long, full life in the land the Lord your God has given you. Like, a long, full life. Like, that sounds pretty cool. And then Ephesians 6:1-3 is, children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord. For this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother is the first commandment with a promise. So this is God promising you something, which obviously has a lot of importance. That if you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you and you will have a long life on earth. Like, that's something that God promises you. Like, that's the biggest blessing. If things will go well for you, like, I'm down. Like, that's a promise from God. That just shows how serious he is about this, that if he's blessing you for it, then that means that it's the right thing to do. Colossians 3:20 is like really quick and just gets to the point, but it's, children, obey your parents, for this pleases the Lord. It's just like a commandment that God gave us. And that's where I stumbled a little bit, because I was doing it because I just thought it was the right thing to do. But I didn't understand how important it was to God and why he needed it, because we really need that leadership in our lives, and we will be blessed if we choose to honor that leadership. Because if we choose to obey our earthly parents, we will be blessed. If you think about it, when you're having like a really bad day, you never really take it out on like your coaches or your teachers or your youth pastors. You usually go home and take it out on your parents. So if you can learn how to respect your parents, it will show respect in other authorities in your life. And I just think that's really important. So that wraps up like the obeying your parents portion of this. And then this part, it took me a little bit longer to figure out what to say. And I usually don't get emotional about things, but this like point, I don't know. It just kind of got to me, and like Zach already talked about it a little bit, but I've been really blessed to have a dad who provides and doesn't hurt us and has stayed there. He doesn't have an addiction. He's loving and caring. And like, I've just kind of taken Father's Day for granted. And I don't know, one night when I was just like trying to figure out what I wanted to say, I was just hit with this thing of, people don't have that. Like, that's not a normal thing in our world, that you have a loving father. And like, I just wanted to say, like, the amount of empathy that I have for the people in the room that don't have that is crazy. Like, I got brought to tears. Like, it was just like, holy cow, like, that would suck. And especially on Father's Day, like, where everybody's celebrating great dads and you don't get to enjoy that. Like, that just seems like a horrible spot to be in. And I think as people, if you do have a really good dad in your life, you need to step up and realize the people that don't, and you need to be there for them, because I have people in my family and really close friends of, if their dad leaves, a part of the kid goes with them, and they have this gap in their life. And obviously the dad's going to leave for earthly reasons because that's not part of God's plan. So they usually take that gap and they fill it with earthly things. And I'm not saying this applies to everyone. I'm not saying you're a bad kid if you don't have a dad. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's more of a temptation because you feel empty. You feel like it's your fault. I've had people leave in my life and have it be my fault. It's always my fault. It's not your fault. And you fill that gap with things like partying and getting into relationships too soon. A lot of the time with girls, when their dad leaves, they become boy crazy because they don't have that security and they don't have that protection from a father, because being a little girl, when they look up to your dad, like they're the most like powerful, cool thing. And if you don't have that, you'll get into relationships too soon because you crave that security. And I don't know. I just had just a lot of empathy for that part of people, because it definitely takes up a lot of our generation of people who don't have good dads. Something that happened to me last week, before, I don't know. It's happened to me since then. And like I said, I do have a good dad. But this past couple months have just kind of been hectic in my mind because people, I just feel like they're leaving left and right. And every time I get close to somebody, they just end up leaving. And Zach had us go and pray by ourselves. Was that last week? Yeah? Okay. It was last week. And we all went and prayed, and I was like, okay. And I just sat there and I prayed. And then suddenly, it wasn't like a vision, so it's not like crazy vision or anything. I just closed my eyes, and like it felt like my foot suddenly was like on a shaky rock. And I felt like I was in like a cave or something because I was just surrounded by this like pit, and I was sitting on this rock. And I wasn't scared, really. I just kind of was like, what is this? And then I just saw the people in my life that have been leaving. And every time a different person left, I would start to stumble. And it didn't look like it, but in my mind, my stomach would drop, and I felt like terrified, and it felt like I was going to fall into this pit. And each time I watched somebody walk away and I felt this hand, like it literally felt like a hand push me up. And I just heard this voice that says, I'm always there. And it happened with each person. And then I sat there and I prayed, and I was like, hey God, what are you trying to say? And I just felt like I heard him be like, people are gonna leave. People are always gonna leave. But I don't go and leave you and then come back for a little bit. I don't hurt you. I don't do any of that. I stay put. And if that's for a dad figure in your life, you don't have that dad figure, you need to look to God, because he doesn't leave. He doesn't hurt you. He doesn't go for a little bit and then come back. He's always there. And that's so important, because I know I just went on a whole thing about how you need to obey your parents because they're so important. If God puts that much importance in your parents, think about the importance of him who created your parents, who created the idea of parents and children. He loves you more than anybody ever could, more than the perfect father is like a speck compared to God. He loves you so much, and he's not going to leave. And I just felt that like reassurance that there's going to be people that are going to leave, and I have to understand that. And for you, might be your dad. But God doesn't ever leave. And also, last night, when I was still trying to figure out this portion of what I wanted to talk about, I didn't really know what to do because I'd been at this car wash all day, and then I went to the Resonate performance, so I was like really tired. And I was laying in my bed, and it was like sunset, about to be sunset, and I just felt like I needed to go for a walk, and I didn't know why. I usually don't go for walks. I don't really do that, but I put my headphones in, I was listening to worship music, and I just went for a walk, and I had my head down, and I wound up in this field that was like 3 blocks away from my house, and there wasn't any houses that was blocking the view, and I just looked up, and it was like the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Like, there was beautiful mountains and like the clouds, and all the colors were all pretty. And I just heard God saying to me that, you see that beautiful sunset? Imagine how much work I put into somebody that I died for. That's just the earth. God didn't die for the pretty things like the oceans and the flowers and the sunsets. God died for you. Imagine how much more detail and beauty he put into your purpose and to your being. He didn't just leave you hanging. And I felt that so heavily, and I don't know why I felt like I needed to share that with the thing about dads, but like, if you feel broken and you feel like because your dad's not there, that you don't have a purpose, you don't end with your parents. You end with God. God died for you, and he loves you. It says in Psalm 68:5 that that God is the father of the fatherless. If you don't have a dad, God's the most amazing dad you could have. And he put purpose, and he put beauty and hard work and detail into who you are. And don't let anybody tell you that because you're broken that you don't have a purpose. It's a cheesy quote, but broken crayons still color. Just because you're broken doesn't mean that you don't still have a purpose. The last little section that I want to talk about, I was reading this plan on the Bible app that Zach told me to read, and it was about this sort of thing. And in one of the days, it was saying how our generation is referred to as the fatherless generation. Like, that's so sad. 1 in 4 kids grow up in a home that doesn't have a father. And being me and wanting to change that kind of stuff, I was like, how could we fix this? And it's like, we can't fix what has been done to us, but we can rise up as youth and realize that we can fix what we do to our children. That's why it's so important to God that we don't have sex before marriage. Because we need to make sure that you have the right spouse who's going to be a good parent. Dads have such an important role in their home, and for the boys in here, you need to realize how important that role is. Obviously, women have an important role, but the man's role is just a little different. Because Chuck was talking about this morning, and he was saying how what you think of your earthly father is what you're going to think of God. And I haven't really ever heard that, and I kind of resonated with that a little bit at home today. And it's so true. Like, me being an independent person, I felt like my dad never understood me. I felt like he didn't understand where I was coming from. I felt like he just thought I was annoying. I've had that feeling with my parents a lot. They just think I'm annoying. And I look back at it and I realized that that's how a lot of my life, how I viewed God. I thought that he didn't understand me. He wouldn't understand because he's just sitting there in his throne with all of his clouds, and he doesn't get it. And it took me a long time to realize that he died on a cross. Yeah, he gets it. He gets what pain feels like. The same thing applies for the men that are going to be future fathers. You have to realize that your kids, what they think of you is what they're going to think of God. Because that's going to be their first father that they ever know before they know God. Treat the girls in your life like how you want the men to treat your daughter. We have an important role, and we can't just mess around about this. What if the fatherless generation grew up to be the generation that the dads just stayed put? What if we changed what happened to us and made it that we didn't do that to our kids? We don't make them go through that. The men stay put, And the women, make sure that you have a baby with the right guy, a guy who knows God. It's so important. 1 in 4 kids don't have a dad. That's not something that's like easy to swallow. We have an important role and we need to fix it. And like I said, we can't fix what has already been done to us, but we can treat others how we wished we could have been treated. I'm going to end in prayer. And, okay. Dear Lord, I pray that these students got something, that they suddenly feel as if you are above everything. You're above their pain, you're above their suffering, you're above their dads that weren't there. I pray that they will not let the pain of this world bring them down, instead realize that this is temporary, that the pain you're feeling right now only lasts for a little bit, and if they choose the right path, they get to spend time with you in eternity. I pray that you will just make it clear to the kids that don't have a dad that you are the father to the fatherless, and that you are above all of their pain that they have from their dad, all of their grudges, all of the hatred that they have because their dad hurt them. Pray that you will let them let that go, and that they will forgive, and that they will look to their Heavenly Father for their hope, that they will look to their Heavenly Father for their strength, because they are not defined by this world. Don't let anything or anybody tell them that they don't have a purpose because they're broken, because they do. Because you turn pain into power. You can turn the hatred that they have for their dad into a loving relationship that they have with their dad, even if it's one-sided.
What love was.
I pray that you will make it real in their lives.
You brought me here to rest,
and that they will remember
and given me space to breathe.
that their life is more beautiful, that their life has more purpose and more
I'll stay
detail.
still